In the spring of 1814, the English countryside wore its usual polite mask, hedges neatly clipped, fields in fresh green, and lanes that looked as if they had been designed for strolling rather than for jolting coaches. Yet the roads were faithful only to the weather, and that morning the sky had the look of indecision, as though it could not choose between sun and spite. Lady Cecily Harrowby had been traveling with purpose and composure. Her purpose was an agreeable one, at least on paper, a visit of inspection to an entailed estate held for her mother's line, followed by the sort of morning calls that kept one properly tethered to society. Her composure, meanwhile, was the product of practice. In drawing rooms, she never rushed, she never pleaded. If something went awry, an invitation forgotten, a rumor misquoted, a remark too sharp, she corrected it as carefully as a seamstress straightening a hem. The coach had left town at first light. By noon it had begun to groan with increasing indignation. Thigh-barring jolts became lurches. Lurches became a rhythm of impact that suggested the wheels had entered into a conspiracy with the ruts. Cecily listened to it all with the calm of a woman who understood that discomfort was a fact, but panic was a luxury. Her companion in the carriage, a silent footman and an expression of dutiful neutrality, could not repair the axle with his prayers. When the coach finally halted beside a coaching inn, its sides bleeding dust from the road and its passenger railings rattled loose, Cecily stepped down with a sigh that was more performance than defeat. The inn was called the King's Anchor, though no one, Cecily suspected, had ever found much comfort in its particular anchorage. The building crouched low, its sign creaking in the wind like a warning. Smoke curled from the chimney in thin, tired strands. The yard held 2 horses that appeared to have been persuaded to endure rather than to work. Inside, the inn was all heat, laughter, and the rough fragrance of ale. The taproom benches had been worn by generations of elbows. Cards lay on tables, already stained with spills that pretended to be respectable. A few travelers huddled around the fire. One stared too hard at Cecily's bonnet, as if it might contain a clue to the day's entertainment. Cecily drew her cloak close and offered the sort of smile that invited conversation without inviting intimacy. Then she noticed the stranger. He was standing a little apart, as though the room's noise could not fully reach him. He wore a dark, well-tailored coat with sleeves fitted like they had been measured rather than guessed. His cravat was tidy but not fussy, his boots clean enough to suggest he did not linger in mud without reason. His hands, broad, not quite delicate, hovered over a cup as if he did not intend to drink it yet. And his face, though handsome in the spare way of those who rarely bother to impress, held an attention that made Cecily feel observed not as a woman, but as a mind. It was the sort of look that in London would have been called too direct. Here, at this inn, it was simply noticeable. He turned his gaze to her, and for one heartbeat the room seemed to hush. Then the stranger did something unremarkably wicked. He offered a nod so slight it could be interpreted as either politeness or provocation. Cecily, who was in no mood to be outperformed, returned the nod with interest. The footman, bless his dutiful silence, moved to secure lodgings. Cecily waited beside the hearth while a landlord's wife approached with a ledger and a voice practiced in both welcome and accusation. "There's room," the woman said. Her eyes measured Cecily's condition without apology. "For 2 persons, if the road doesn't insist upon further delays. Breakfast included, if you count what passes for it as a kind of breakfast." Cecily accepted this assessment with her usual restraint. "We shall count it as breakfast," she replied, "and if it improves, we shall be very grateful." The landlord's wife gave her a look that suggested she found wit exhausting but respectable. Then she turned toward the stranger, as though he might be easier. "You," she said, pointing with her chin, "you're to share the room with the lady." The stranger's brows lifted. "I beg your pardon, ma'am. I had not thought." Cecily stepped in before the argument could begin. "No need to beg," she said. "If the inn provides one room, we shall accept it and pretend it was always our plan." The stranger's mouth curved. That is precisely the sort of agreement one sees between couples in novels. Cecily's eyes sharpened. And we are certain you read novels, sir, rather than newspapers. A faint pause occurred. It was not awkward. It was the pause of two swords being assessed at the hilt. He inclined his head again. My name is Thaddeus Ashbourne. Lady Cecily Harrowby, she answered, her voice crisp enough to slice jam. Thaddeus's gaze flickered, as if checking the correctness of her title within his own mental catalogue. Harrowby, he repeated. I have passed it, once, on a road that was better than the one we are presently enduring. Cecily did not like the ease with which he spoke of places. Men in society often performed familiarity. They pretended to have walked every lane. This man, however, seemed genuinely to have known the path. His words carried the weight of a memory rather than the shimmer of a boast. Then you will understand, she said, why I do not approve of the King's Anchor's current route. His laugh was quiet and, to Cecily's annoyance, delighted. The inn's name appears to promise safety. It is a lie, or the anchor has been bewitched. The landlord's wife, Isolde, if Cecily had heard her correctly, snorted as she took payment. Be bewitched, be damned. If you don't eat, you'll be sick. If you do eat, you'll be sick. That's the trade of this place. Come now, rooms are up the stairs. As they followed Isolde up, Cecily felt the strange satisfaction of not being alone. Not in the comforting sense, in the strategic sense. She had always believed that when a woman's movements were forced by circumstances, she should choose who to be forced with. That thought, she realized with a small internal win, included this stranger. In the room, the fire was faint, and the bedposts looked as though they had hosted complaints. Thaddeus moved at once toward the window, checking the yard below. Cecily noticed it. She noticed everything. You inspect, she said. I observe, he corrected, as if the distinction mattered. It does, Cecily replied. A man who inspects expects discovery. A man who observes expects explanation. He looked back at her with a mild expression. Which one are you? Cecily drew a breath, considering how much truth a woman could offer without revealing herself entirely. Her intelligence had always been a weapon, but weapons could be disarmed. I, she said at last, am the sort who requires the world to account for itself. If it does not, I simply write the bill for it. Thaddeus's eyes warmed, not with surrender, but with a grudging admiration that annoyed Cecily because it was sincere. The next hour passed in the company of unavoidable delay. They drank what the inn called tea and ate a meal that tasted as if it had been simmered in patience. Thaddeus asked questions about the estate Cecily was visiting, about the people who lived nearby, about the state of roads and the temper of landlords. Cecily answered selectively. She gave him just enough to keep him engaged, and just enough to ensure he could not use her words against her later. At one point, she asked a question in return, and his expression sharpened, as if she had taken liberties with a private door. You say you have passed Harrowby? She said. When? Thaddeus's fork paused. Last year. On what occasion? He hesitated. On business? That is a phrase men use when they wish to sound honest while remaining evasive. Cecily set down her fork. Tell me something else, then. What business keeps a man traveling after dark, with no companion and no luggage to speak of? Thaddeus's gaze moved to her face. You have been watching me, he said. You believe I only watch myself? She replied. Another pause, this time sharper, more intentional. Thaddeus took a breath. I have luggage, he said. It is simply not with me. Cecily's eyes narrowed. Then I suppose someone else possesses it. Perhaps your valet. My valet, he said, the words slow as if formed with reluctance, is the sort that does not survive the road well. Cecily nearly smiled. A dramatic confession. It was not intended to be dramatic, he returned. I had hoped to avoid becoming a figure in someone's story. And yet you insist on sharing a room with me. He looked at her as though the truth were a coin he weighed in his palm. "The landlord's wife insisted," he said too quickly. Cecily lifted a brow. "Isolde insists on many things, I suspect. Most of them end with payment." Thaddeus's expression tightened. "You assume I am paying." Cecily's temper rose at the implication. "If you are not paying, sir, you are either remarkably lucky or extraordinarily reckless." His reply came as a quiet, controlled exhale. "Recklessness is my least successful trait." That, Cecily decided, was the first genuinely honest thing he had said. In the corridor outside their room, voices drifted up, loud laughter and the scrape of boots. A man called for another round. Then a different voice joined, lower, intimate, and keenly amused. "Lady Harrowby," Isolde's voice rang from below. "If you please, there's someone to call upon you. Says it's important." Cecily's stomach tightened with the familiar dread of interruption. Country places were worse than London. At least in London, disruptions were scheduled. Here, one simply had to endure surprise. She opened the door. Isolde waited with the air of a woman delivering either news or opportunity for mischief. "There's a gentleman," Isolde said, holding out a calling card between two fingers as if it might stain. "He claims he knows you. He says you'll understand if you meet him downstairs." Cecily glanced at Thaddeus, who had not moved from his place by the window. She could not tell what he felt. His face offered nothing, but his attention was absolute. Cecily took the card. She recognized the handwriting, neat, practiced, and too self-assured. It belonged to someone in her orbit, someone whose name she would not speak aloud in a room where walls might repeat things. She did not want to meet him. She wanted to tear the card in half and scatter it like confetti. But she was not a woman who abandoned decisions simply because they were unpleasant. She had never been. "All right," she said to Isolde. "I shall meet him." Thaddeus's voice came from behind her, unexpectedly steady. "May I suggest you do not?" Cecily turned toward him slowly. "You suggest many things, sir, yet you do not explain them." "I explain," he said, his tone clipped with restraint. "Only when it is useful." "Then tell me what is useful now." His jaw tightened. "This man, whoever he is, will recognize you. Or he will pretend to." Cecily's eyes flashed. "Either is an argument for meeting him." Thaddeus studied her. "You think recognition cannot harm you because you are prepared." "You think harm can reach me because you fear it will," she corrected. "You are wrong." Thaddeus's gaze held hers. "Am I?" In that moment, Cecily realized that he was not only concerned for her reputation, he was concerned for his own, not out of tenderness, out of guilt or something adjacent. Cecily turned away and descended the stairs without further debate. She joined Isolde in the tap room where the fire crackled and men stared with the sort of curiosity that refused to be polite. The gentleman who approached her was dressed with care. He wore a coat in a deep blue that tried to look fashionable by being expensive. His hair was styled to resemble effortless confidence. When he bowed, he did so as though he had practiced in mirrors. "Lady Harrowby," he said, voice warm, "you have been expected." Cecily's smile did not reach her eyes. Expected by whom? His gaze shifted, calculating, then settled back on her face. "By those who have interest in your family's arrangements." The phrase sounded like it had been assembled out of vague threats. Cecily had heard it at balls where smiles hid knives. "And what arrangement is that?" she asked. He produced another calling card. "An invitation," he said, "from the gentleman who will be at Almack's next week." Cecily's fingers tightened on the first card, already feeling it in her bones. She could attend Almack's, she could do much, but there were invitations that were not invitations. There were invitations that were traps made of silk. "And what gentleman would that be?" she asked. The man leaned closer. "Mr. Ashbourne." Cecily froze. Thaddeus Ashbourne. The name landed too neatly, too conveniently. It was as though someone had placed a signpost in her path. She forced her expression into control. "Mr. Ashbourne?" she repeated. He nodded, smiling as if he had successfully delivered a puzzle piece. "He has spoken of you. He has expressed interest." Interest. Another word that could mean admiration or manipulation. Cecily looked at the calling cards again. The handwriting on the offered card matched the one in her hand. She felt the room's noise recede, leaving only her heartbeat. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle. "You are certain?" "I am certain," the gentleman assured her. "He is a man of principles." Cecily nearly laughed. Principles were the favorite costume of people who wished to conceal their motives. "Then you may deliver my thanks," she said, "and tell Mr. Ashbourne that if he wishes to speak with me, he should do so like an honest man, face to face." The gentleman blinked. "He will," he promised. Cecily turned away from him as if he had ceased to matter. She found Isolde's eyes and gave a subtle signal. "Continue with your work, pretend nothing has happened." Then she returned upstairs, where Thaddeus waited by the window with the same guarded posture. When she entered, he did not glance at her at once. He looked toward the yard as if listening for the clatter of consequences. Cecily closed the door and set the calling cards on the table between them. "You told me your name," she said. "You did not tell me why it draws other men to my attention." Thaddeus's gaze shifted to the cards. For the first time, his composure cracked, only slightly, only enough for Cecily's intelligence to catch it. "You met him," he said. "I did," Cecily replied. Thaddeus's expression went still. "And he said Almack's." Cecily nodded. "He said Mr. Ashbourne would be there, and he said you have expressed interest in me." Thaddeus's throat moved. "He lies." Cecily regarded him. "Then why did he use your name?" Thaddeus stood, moving closer. He did not touch her, though the instinct to do so seemed to exist in the set of his shoulders. "You assume I am the man they think I am," he said. Cecily's chin lifted. "You are not?" Thaddeus's eyes held hers, gray and too honest in their refusal to comfort. "No," he said, "I am not." Cecily felt a strange surge of triumph mixed with resentment. She had known he was evasive. She had not realized, however, how deep his evasions went. "And yet you accepted the name," she said. "Ashbourne." "I accepted it," he replied, "because it has become convenient to hide under." Cecily's fingers pressed into her palm. "Hide from whom?" Thaddeus's gaze moved toward the door, then away again. "From the kind of people who think a woman's entailed estate can be purchased with politeness," he said. "From the kind of people who believe they can rewrite a man's identity with ink and influence." Cecily's lips parted. "Someone has rewritten you?" He met her stare. "Not exactly rewritten. Borrowed." Cecily's mind turned quickly. "Borrowed your name. Borrowed your face." Thaddeus's mouth tightened. "Borrowed my life." The confession was not tender. It was hard-earned. Cecily did not soften. She respected honesty, even when it made her uneasy. "So what is your true identity?" she demanded. Thaddeus inhaled, as if preparing to carry a weight that had already bruised him. "My true name is Aram." He stopped. Cecily saw it, the pause of a man deciding which danger mattered more, revealing himself or remaining hidden. "You stopped," she observed. "That means it can get worse." Thaddeus looked at her. "If I say it, men will come. They will bring papers. They will bring authority. They will bring the sort of attention that ruins women first and men second." "And you care about ruining me?" Cecily asked with sharp disbelief. "I care about ruining the wrong person," he corrected. You are not the target. You are the collateral I cannot bear. Cecily exhaled. You are very reluctant for a man who has willingly entangled himself in my route. His eyes darkened. I did not entangle myself. Cecily crossed her arms. Then you were dragged here by fate. No, he said. I was dragged here by my own mistakes. She studied his face, his guardedness, the burn mark on his hand she had noticed earlier when he gestured over his cup. The comma-shaped burn could have been an accident, and yet accidents did not typically produce such clarity. Cecily leaned forward slightly. Tell me your flaw, Mr. Ashbourne, since you have so many secrets. What went wrong? Thaddeus's expression turned bitter, though he restrained the bitterness as if it were a habit he was trying to unlearn. My flaw, he said, is that I think I can control other people's hunger. Cecily's brow furrowed. Hunger? Thaddeus paced a step, stopping by the window again. The yard below looked bleak, and the light that entered the room made his coat seem even darker. There is a man, he continued, who believes he can make the marriage mart behave like a court case. He buys leverage. He purchases influence. He uses calling cards like knives. Cecily felt a chill. And he has chosen me? He chose your name, Thaddeus said, your title, your entailed rights, your mother's reputation as a woman who never— He stopped again, as if he had nearly said something too personal. Cecily's voice became colder. Never what? Thaddeus met her gaze. Never forgave. Cecily's breath caught. Her mother's reputation had been built on restraint, yes, but also on the stubborn refusal to be manipulated. The idea of someone using it as a lever made Cecily feel strangely exposed. You knew my family, she said. I have heard of them, Thaddeus replied. Hearings, Cecily said, are seldom honest. Yet you speak as though you have seen it. Thaddeus looked away. I have seen pieces, he admitted. I have seen the way men smile when they want permission to harm. Cecily's mind, ever the engine, began to arrange the truth into something actionable. So you are not the man who offered me Almack's invitation under your name, she said. You are the man being used by someone else's strategy. Thaddeus nodded once. Cecily's lips tightened. Then why not confess at once? Why not tell me you were stolen, that your identity had been taken as a mask? Thaddeus's eyes flickered with frustration, toward himself, not her. Because the moment I confess, he said, the wrong men will believe they can purchase you with my confession. Cecily stared at him. It was the first time he had described a fear rather than a defense. And you, she said slowly, think you can protect me by refusing to explain. I think I can protect you, he replied, by making myself look guilty instead of important. Cecily felt the oddest impulse to commend his sense of self-sacrifice and to slap him for believing it was enough. How noble, she said dryly. How exhausting. Thaddeus's mouth twitched. You do not think it noble? No, Cecily said. Nobility is a story. I prefer outcomes. Thaddeus's gaze sharpened again, and she saw admiration there. Again sincere, again irritating. Then let us produce an outcome, he said. Cecily picked up the calling card from the table and slid it toward him. Who sent this? Thaddeus stared at the handwriting for a long moment. Then his expression tightened. It is not my handwriting, he said. Cecily nodded. So not you. Therefore the other man, your borrower. Thaddeus exhaled. Yes. Cecily continued. And he believes he can bring us into society's bright rooms and keep us there until we are trapped by expectation. Thaddeus's voice lowered. He wants you at Almack's. Because Almack's is a marketplace, Cecily said. A woman is not only assessed for her beauty, but for her availability, her fortune, her usefulness, and entailed estates. She did not finish. Thaddeus's silence answered her. Cecily turned her focus to the immediate problem, their stranded situation. The coach could be repaired, or it could not. They could remain at the inn, or they could leave by another means. Society would not wait. "Our carriage is broken," she said, "and yet the invitation appears scheduled as if we were already in London." Thaddeus's eyes moved to hers. "That is what alarms me. Someone has been tracking you." Cecily's body tightened. "In that case, my association with you is not only inconvenient. It is dangerous." "Then we must be careful," Thaddeus said. Cecily's brow lifted. "Careful is not your greatest virtue." His mouth curved slightly. "No, my greatest virtue is honesty." Cecily's eyes narrowed. "That is not how it appears." "It is how it will appear," he said, "if we handle this properly." She regarded him, then spoke with measured decision. "Tomorrow we will leave. Today we will not be seen together." Thaddeus looked startled. "You wish to separate?" "I wish to prevent gossip from assembling a convenient story," Cecily replied. "Society collects narratives like moths collect light." Thaddeus's expression went thoughtful. "You fear the taproom will talk." "I fear London will believe," she said. He stared at her a long moment, and then, because he was Thaddeus, because he could not help himself, he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You are brilliant," he said, "and it is infuriating." Cecily's cheeks warmed. She refused to show it. "Then be less infuriating." Thaddeus's eyes held hers. "You are afraid I will become the sort of man you cannot afford to know." Cecily's voice sharpened. "I am not afraid. I am determined." "Determination," he said softly, "is a different kind of fear." Before Cecily could respond, Isolde appeared in the doorway with a bundle of linens and the air of a woman interrupting fate. "Breakfast will be in half an hour," Isolde announced. "And you two, if you intend to continue being mysterious, at least do it quietly. The men downstairs are already guessing. They're guessing you're married, for pity's sake." Cecily's eyes flashed. "Who told them that?" Isolde shrugged. "Your brother would have laughed. He would have liked the attention. But since you do not have a brother visible to the world, they have decided you must be a widow or a wife." Cecily felt a sharp sting. Her brother, Lord Harrowby, had been abroad for months. His absence had already fueled rumor. Thaddeus's posture tightened. "Is there always this much speculation?" he asked. Isolde gave a look that said men should not ask questions they could not survive answering. "This inn is a stage. You enter, you must accept the play." Cecily met Thaddeus's gaze after Isolde left. "You see," she said, "even the walls want entertainment." Thaddeus's eyes held hers. "Then we should choose our lines." Cecily's mind caught at the word choose. "What if," she said, "we give society a false story in order to prevent it from finding the true one?" Thaddeus's expression sharpened in interest. "You intend to manipulate them?" Cecily's smile was small and dangerous. "I intend to manage them." He studied her like she was a page she had not expected to read. "You could ruin a man," he said. Cecily's eyes gleamed. "I could, but I will first decide whether I wish to." He let out a slow breath. "Then decide quickly. The longer we delay, the more entrenched the lie becomes." Cecily's voice dropped. "You mean the gentleman who used your name is already building a chain? He intends for the chain to link me to the wrong man." Thaddeus nodded once. "Yes." Cecily turned toward the table and gathered the calling cards. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we will depart by dawn, and before we go, you will do something for me." Thaddeus raised his brows. "Anything." Cecily's gaze pinned him. "You will write a calling card." Thaddeus blinked. "A calling card?" Cecily nodded. You will write it in a hand that is not yours. You will make it appear to be from me." Thaddeus stared, incredulous. "You want to fake your own handwriting?" "I want to misdirect his attention," Cecily replied. "If he expects me at Almack's, then we will behave as if we never received the invitation. Yet you, whoever you truly are, must be seen doing something harmless but conspicuous." Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. "What do you suggest?" Cecily lifted the cards again and considered. "Tell me what you know. How does society recognize one another here? How does gossip travel from inn to city?" Thaddeus's mouth curved. "By paper and by pretense." "Exactly," Cecily said. "So we will weaponize both." Thaddeus looked at her with sudden seriousness. "You trust me to imitate you." "I trust you to follow instructions," Cecily corrected. "Trust is overrated." Thaddeus exhaled. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, quickly, as if he could not help enjoying the sparring even while danger tightened around them. "Very well," he said. "Give me your instructions." Cecily began at once, outlining a plan that combined wit with strategy. She would instruct Isolde to deliver one card to a known local man who had a foot in city society. She would instruct Thaddeus to leave another card in the tap room with a message that implied Cecily had received a private engagement elsewhere. It was not deception for its own sake. It was defensive deception. Thaddeus listened, asking questions at critical points. He did not interrupt her. He did not dominate. And that, Cecily realized, was why his flaws mattered. He did not lack intelligence. He simply lacked patience with the world's cruelty. When the hour of breakfast arrived, they moved downstairs together, but with a careful distance. Cecily kept her posture erect. Thaddeus kept his attention politely elsewhere. Yet their silence did not go unnoticed. If gossip needed a spark, they provided it with restraint. Isolde handed over food with the satisfaction of a woman participating in a plot she would later narrate. "You will be leaving?" Isolde asked, as if she were asking about the weather. "Yes," Cecily replied, "as soon as the coach repairs." Thaddeus added, "We will require a faster horse in place of time." Isolde's eyes widened slightly, then she leaned closer. "That's bold. It will cost extra." Thaddeus looked at Cecily. "Boldness is sometimes cheaper than delay," he said. Cecily's lips twitched. "You do not believe that," she said. "I do not," he admitted, "but I believe it might keep you safe." Cecily's heart gave a small, traitorous lurch. They ate quickly, paid their bill with careful generosity, and prepared their departure. Before leaving, Cecily took Thaddeus aside. The corridor between their room and the yard had fewer ears, and she intended to use that advantage. "Now," she said quietly, "write the card." Thaddeus hesitated. "I do not know your hand well enough." "You do," Cecily replied. "You observed me at supper. You watched the way I held the pen. You recognized what I concealed when I spoke." Thaddeus's jaw tightened as if she had struck at a sore truth. "I can imitate, but if your family catches the difference—" "They will," Cecily said, "which is precisely why we do not send it to my family. We send it into the hands of those who profit from confusion." Thaddeus met her eyes. "You are willing to harm them." Cecily's voice sharpened. "They have already harmed us. I only intend to make their harm expensive." Thaddeus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. He sat at the inn's plain table and wrote. Cecily watched his hand, steady, precise, not quite her own movements, but close enough to deceive. When he finished, he held the card out to her. It looked like her. Not perfectly, nothing could, but enough. Cecily took it and folded it with care. "Excellent," she said. Thaddeus's eyes sharpened. "And you?" he asked. "Do you truly intend to remain above their scheme?" Cecily's smile was thin. "No," she admitted. "I intend to rise within it, and then end it." He stared at her, and the expression in his eyes was both admiration and fear. They left the inn at dawn, the horses pulling them as if the road itself had grown embarrassed by the delay. The world outside looked fresh and new, but Cecily felt as though she carried the taproom's smoke in her lungs. She did not look back. Thaddeus did not either. For a time, the conversation between them was sparse. Cecily asked practical questions about routes and repairs. Thaddeus answered. They behaved like acquaintances rather than allies, and the pretense felt exhausting because it was unnecessary. Soon, however, the exhaustion became purposeful. They arrived in a nearby town where Cecily would make her next morning call, an appearance of normality so sharp it bordered on defiance. At the townhouse she rented temporarily, Cecily received a letter. The handwriting on the envelope belonged to no one she knew. The paper itself was thick, the sort of stationer's stock used by men who could afford to make intimidation look expensive. She opened it in private. Her eyes moved quickly across the lines. Then she read the same sentence twice, as if repetition might change its meaning. Thaddeus had been followed, not merely by rumor, by someone with documents, by someone who understood the marriage mart's appetite. Cecily folded the letter slowly and turned to Thaddeus, who had been waiting in the drawing room with the stiff patience of a man who knew he was dangerous even when he did not mean to be. "What does it say?" he asked. Cecily looked at him. "It says," she replied, "that your borrowed identity is not merely borrowed. It is claimed." Thaddeus's face tightened. "Claimed by the man with the invitations." Cecily nodded. "He wants you linked to me." Thaddeus swore softly under his breath. Cecily's tone remained controlled. "He wants you as a companion," she said, "as a man in good standing, if not your own, then his. Then he will present himself as the author of the arrangement. He will call it fate. He will call it matchmaking. It will be neither." Thaddeus ran a hand through his hair. He looked, in that moment, like a man trying to solve a problem he had created. "You think I consented," he said. Cecily lifted her chin. "I think you have allowed your pride to delay your honesty. That is a flaw. It is also the flaw that put you in this position." Thaddeus's eyes flashed. "You blame me." "I do not blame you for being used," Cecily replied. "I blame you for believing your silence could protect someone else." The words landed with weight. Thaddeus's shoulders lowered slightly, as if he had been carrying the accusation in his own chest. "I did not think she would use you," he said quietly. Cecily blinked. "She?" Thaddeus looked at the floor for a moment before speaking. "There is a woman behind it." Cecily's mind snapped to Isolde, to the innkeeper's sharp eyes, to the fact that the richest gossip often came from women with ledgers. But Isolde had not offered this level of orchestration. Her power was local, not strategic. "Who is she?" Cecily asked. Thaddeus inhaled slowly. "A woman of influence in London," he said. "Someone who believes the world is improved by her decisions." Cecily's expression hardened. "Then she believes she can decide me." Thaddeus's gaze met hers. "She believes she can decide everyone," he said. Cecily stood. "Then we will make her decisions cost more than she intends." Thaddeus looked startled. "You will go to the authorities?" Cecily's laugh was brief and humorless. "Authorities are trained to believe papers before women. In this country, a document can become a destiny. I intend to weaponize reputation instead." Thaddeus studied her, and for the first time his face softened in a way that looked dangerous. "You would take the scandal upon yourself." Cecily's eyes gleamed. "Not upon myself," she corrected. "Upon the correct party." He stared, and then, with reluctant admiration, he sat forward and listened. Cecily crafted a response plan with the same intelligence she used at morning calls. She would send a calling card of her own, publicly timed, to a reputable household where it would be observed. She would ensure that her next engagement appeared to exclude Thaddeus. but privately, she would do the opposite. She would meet him in a quiet parlor after the calls, where she could confront him and demand the truth he had withheld. "I will not be a tool," Cecily said. "If you are in hiding, you will hide from her, but not from me. I will know enough to help." Thaddeus's expression tightened. "And if knowing hurts you?" Cecily's voice softened only slightly. "It will," she admitted, "but pain is not the same as ruin." That evening, while the town's lights began to glow and the air carried the faint scent of damp earth, Cecily received several callers. She endured their compliments with measured grace. She smiled at gossip with the careful expression of a woman who refused to be shocked. A rumor began to bloom anyway, because rumor did not require permission. It required only uncertainty. By the time her final caller left, Cecily's head felt too full. She excused herself with a reason that sounded plausible and became, for once, a truth. Exhaustion from travel. Thaddeus waited where she had directed, by a side door in the back of the house, where curtains framed the darkness like theater. When she entered the parlor with him, the air between them turned private. Cecily closed the door gently. "Now," she said, "tell me who you truly are." Thaddeus's gaze held hers. "If I tell you, it may put you at risk." Cecily stepped closer. "Then you should have decided sooner. You have already put me at risk by lying." Thaddeus's eyes flickered with something that looked like regret. "I did not lie," he said. "I withheld." Cecily's smile turned sharp. "Withholding is a kind of lie when it directs someone's thoughts." Thaddeus stared at her for a long moment, then finally seemed to accept that the argument had reached its end. "My true name," he said, "is Reginald Merton." The sound of the name did something to Cecily's mind. She had not heard it spoken aloud in her presence, but she recognized it from a paper she once read in a solicitor's office, an older case involving a debt and a contested document. She did not show recognition. Instead, she studied him. "So you are a man with a past," she said. Thaddeus's mouth tightened. "Not a past," he corrected. "A present that has not finished punishing me." Cecily's eyes narrowed. "And the woman who borrowed your identity is connected to that paper?" Thaddeus nodded once. "Yes." Cecily held his gaze. "Then she is not merely trying to trap you. She is trying to use you as leverage in a larger dispute, perhaps about a title, perhaps about an estate." Thaddeus's expression sharpened with relief that she had guessed correctly. Cecily's voice lowered. "You knew the sort of man who would come when a woman's name is used as a lure." "Yes," he admitted. "And you still allowed your borrowed name to be placed against mine," Cecily said. Thaddeus looked pained. "I allowed it because I believed I could undo it," he replied. "I believed I could intercept the cards before they reached London." "And you failed," Cecily said. Thaddeus's jaw tightened. "I failed," he agreed, "because I thought I could do it alone." Cecily studied him. His flaw was not only pride, it was isolation. He believed he could carry his wrongs without involving others. It was a noble thought in theory, and a disastrous thought in practice. Cecily's anger loosened just slightly, giving way to something more complex. She was not ready to forgive him for being evasive, but she was beginning to understand him. "Then," she said, "let us do it properly. Together." Thaddeus stared. "Together?" "Yes," Cecily replied. "You have a secret identity. I have influence. A witty woman at the right moment can become a key. A man with a past can become a warning." Thaddeus's mouth curved faintly. "You make it sound almost romantic." Cecily's eyes flashed. "Do not flatter me. It sounds romantic because you are the sort of man who turns danger into a conversation." Thaddeus laughed quietly. "And you are the sort of woman who turns conversation into action." Cecily's heart tightened again, but she refused to surrender to it. "We are not here for romance," she reminded him. "No," he agreed, voice low. "We are here for survival." Then he stepped closer and, this time, His hand moved toward hers, slow and asking without grabbing. Cecily did not pull away. His fingers brushed hers, warm and careful. The touch was brief, but it carried an admission. He was not only hiding from the woman who pursued him, he was also hiding from the fact that Cecily had become something more difficult to resist than any document. Cecily withdrew her hand and turned her face away slightly, as though she could hide her reaction behind composure. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will go with me to a solicitor." Thaddeus's brows rose. "Now you speak like a woman with a bill to collect." "I always speak like that," Cecily replied. "It is men who pretend they are surprised." Thaddeus looked at her, and his expression softened in a way that made Cecily's resolve tremble. He nodded. "Very well. We go tomorrow." The days that followed were a storm in polished clothing. Cecily made morning calls that were as much reconnaissance as courtesy. She delivered calling cards that appeared innocent and were, in fact, precise weapons. She chatted with ladies whose smiles were almost sweet, while her words gathered information like a net. Thaddeus, meanwhile, remained outwardly restrained. When he appeared in public beside her, he did so with a careful distance that prevented scandal while inviting curiosity. Gossip did what it always did. It tried to make sense of them. It claimed they were engaged. It claimed they were estranged lovers. It claimed Cecily had taken pity on the man whose fortune was uncertain. Those rumors were useful. They created a story that kept other rumors, the dangerous ones, the document-based ones, blurred. At last, the season turned toward its famous climax, a week before the height of invitations, when Almack's became a stage and every handshake felt like a negotiation. Cecily insisted on attending. Thaddeus protested, not because he feared society's eyes, but because he feared the consequences of his own history. His flaw, Cecily realized, was not unwillingness to act. It was unwillingness to accept that he could be loved without being used. He said one evening, as they stood near a mirror in their rented rooms, "If you attend, they will look for a reason to ruin you. They will blame you for my involvement." Cecily looked at him with the kind of calm that only came from having decided long ago. "They will try," she said, "but they will not succeed." He turned toward her. "How do you know?" Cecily met his gaze. "Because I have learned something about myself," she replied. "I have intelligence, I have agency, and I do not require permission to defend my life." Thaddeus's expression tightened. "You have grown bolder." Cecily smiled faintly. "I have grown tired of being handled." The night of Almack's arrived with glitter and tension. The rooms were warm with perfume and expectation. Ladies floated in satin and pearls. Gentlemen moved like clocks, precise, self-assured, counting the moments until they could act. Cecily entered with her head high and her expression controlled. She moved in the manner of a woman who knew she belonged. Thaddeus's presence beside her did not appear scandalous. It appeared deliberate. The moment Cecily stepped inside, she felt the eyes, the sudden, hungry attention of those who smelled plot. She also felt something else, an anxious awareness from Thaddeus himself, as if he could sense the document-based storm gathering. It happened quickly. A lady approached, a woman dressed with elegance that bordered on coldness. Her smile was precise. Her voice, when she spoke Cecily's name, carried ownership. "Lady Harrowby," the woman said, "how pleased I am to see you tonight." Cecily returned the smile, equally precise. "Madam," she replied, "you have arranged a great deal of excitement." The woman's gaze moved to Thaddeus. Her smile sharpened. "And you have brought him." Thaddeus's jaw tightened. Cecily's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. "You used my name to lure an arrangement," Cecily said. "Now you have it in your hands." The woman's expression did not change. "I prefer to call it matchmaking," she corrected. Cecily laughed softly. "Matchmaking is a game for those who have no power over the consequences." The lady's eyes glittered. Power is simply a form of preparation. Cecily's voice lowered. And you prepared poorly. The lady's smile faltered by a fraction. Cecily turned her gaze to Thaddeus and spoke as if they were merely discussing the music. "Mr. Merton," she said. Thaddeus stiffened. Cecily had never said his true name publicly. Doing so now was a calculated blow. The woman stared, surprised. Cecily continued with gentle clarity. "Your borrowed identity ends tonight, not because you have asked for rescue, but because I refuse to be used." The lady's face hardened. "You cannot." Cecily cut her off. "I can, and I will." Then, with a subtle gesture toward the gentleman standing nearby, Cecily signaled that the solicitor's documents were ready to be delivered, quietly, publicly enough to be witnessed, but discreet enough to avoid street chaos. Thaddeus stepped forward. His expression was controlled, but Cecily saw the emotion beneath: humiliation, relief, and the fear of being truly seen. He did not apologize. He did something braver. He claimed the truth. "My name is Reginald Merton," he said, voice steady, "and I will not permit this woman to use a fabricated story to purchase my future and a lady's reputation." The room's noise dimmed as gossip itself seemed to pause, startled by the audacity of a declaration. The lady in question recovered quickly, of course. She was not a fool. "So dramatic," she said lightly. "You two think you can perform righteousness." Cecily's eyes flashed. "No," she corrected. "We think we can perform consequences." It was the sort of line that did not merely win arguments, it transformed them into remembered history. The gentleman nearby, one of the reputable men Cecily had cultivated through morning calls, stepped in. His voice was formal. "There are documents," he said, "presented by Lady Harrowby and witnessed by her solicitor. The matter will proceed." The lady's expression darkened. She had expected to weaponize gossip. She had not expected Cecily to bring papers with witnesses. Gossip could be fought. It simply required the correct kind of ammunition. As the lady withdrew into a knot of followers, Cecily turned her head and met Thaddeus's gaze. He looked at her with something like awe and with something like regret. "You did it," he murmured. Cecily's voice softened just slightly. "I did what I must," she replied. Thaddeus's hands flexed at his sides, as if he wanted to hold her and feared it would harm her. "You must have been exhausted," he said. Cecily smiled, small and honest. "Exhausted, yes," she admitted, "but not helpless." Thaddeus's eyes warmed. "And you were never helpless," he said. Cecily looked away, pretending to observe the dancers. Yet her mind, betraying her, replayed every sparring exchange, every moment she had refused to be handled. The wonder was not that he had lied. The wonder was that he had finally chosen truth. Later, after Almack's, after the proper murmurs and the careful departures, Cecily found Thaddeus in a quiet antechamber where the music's distant pulse became background rather than pressure. He turned toward her, and his expression was rawer here than it had been in the bright ballroom. "You could have hated me," he said. Cecily lifted her chin. "I was angry. It would have been easier to be angry than to be impressed." Thaddeus's mouth curved. "Impressed by what?" Cecily met his gaze. "By your refusal to keep lying once it mattered," she replied. Thaddeus stepped closer, careful this time, as though he had learned restraint not only as a tactic but as a respect. "My greatest flaw," he said quietly, "is that I believe love must be paid for with suffering." Cecily's eyes softened despite herself. "Your greatest flaw," she corrected gently, "is that you assume you are the only one who can carry consequences." His gaze held hers, and the air between them became charged with a truth neither could deny. Cecily reached up and touched his burned hand, only once, light as a signature. "This," she said, "is proof you have been wounded, but it is not proof that you must wound yourself further." Thaddeus's breath caught. "And now," Cecily continued, You must stop believing you deserve to be alone." Thaddeus looked at her as though she had given him an unexpected gift. Then he did something that could have been scandalous and yet felt entirely proper. He asked for her intention. "Lady Cecily," he said, "will you permit me to call upon you, openly, without borrowed names? Will you allow me to be the man beside you, not the secret that scares you?" Cecily's heart beat fast. She thought of morning calls. She thought of chaperones, calling cards, entailed estates, the marriage mart's cold appetite. And she thought of their coaching in, the way their minds had sparred like two intellects refusing to yield. "Yes," she said, voice steady, "but not as a man's rescue, as an equal." Thaddeus's smile was slow and real. "As an equal," he echoed. Cecily exhaled, and the tension that had held her like a corset finally loosened. Outside, society would continue to gossip. It would always do so. But for the first time, Cecily understood that gossip, though sharp, could not cut what was decided with agency. Thaddeus offered his arm in a gesture of respectful certainty. Cecily took it. They walked out together into the night air, into a world that had tried to trap them, now forced to adjust to the truth they had claimed. And though their romance began in a lie, it ended in the only thing that could matter in Regency England, a public promise made private with honesty and kept by action. Neutral studio background, soft lighting, photorealistic.